The story is often told that Pablo Picasso was in a restaurant sitting at the bar having a drink, and a woman recognized him across the room. So she walked over and introduced herself and said how much she admired his art. And then she asked him if he would draw her a picture on a cocktail napkin. So Picasso took out his fountain pen, and in a few deft flourishes, he created the drawing and passed it over the bar to the woman. And she gasped in delight and said, "It's a masterpiece." And Picasso said to her, "That will be $10,000. And this time the woman gasped in shock, and she said, "But that only took you 10 seconds to draw." And he said, "No, madam, that took me a lifetime." Hello, I'm Matthew, and I teach the techniques that I use to go from part-time assistant in a small-town shop to designing and producing over 300 major events per year for some of the world's most prestigious clients and venues. The materials and methods used in that type of work are distinctly different from those that someone would encounter either in typical floristry or creative training, and they are also different than you would encounter in standard practice. So if you want to learn the skilled techniques that will distinguish your creative work in any market, you have found the right person in me, and I'm delighted we're connecting. Now, back to Mr. Picasso. I have a feeling the story is apocryphal. I've heard it told with other artists in his place, and I've heard it told with other sums. But the point remains, and I have for you today a demonstration of that point. It is a chic, sophisticated alternative to the ubiquitous Tablescape. And I hope you'll love it. I hope you'll find the ideas useful too. So welcome or welcome back, as your case may be. Please make yourself comfortable. I'm going to get us set up to begin together right at the start. See you then. So, I have already hinted that we are not going to be tablescaping. In fact, I could probably pick up a lot more paid work if I accepted every invitation I receive to teach a class on tablescaping, but I'm proud to say I've never taken the bait. And that is because there is simply a better way. And I always think of what that wonderful mid-20th century writer and thinker and truth-teller, Italo Calvino, famously said that nothing is more complex than simplicity, and perfection is the ultimate outcome of subtraction. That's particularly true in the time we're living in, because yes, simplicity uses limited elements, and when we are working with very few ingredients, they must all be exactly right. Be that formal, informal, something in between, they must all be exactly right. There is no room for clutter. There is no room for being unsure. And unless you have the luxury of an endless budget, making more with less is your superpower. But it only works when you do it really intelligently. So, between now and the end of the year, when we're all thinking about holiday entertaining, I have planned programming for you that answers all of your frequently asked questions. What to serve, recipes, how to, hospitality, etc. But I thought we'd better begin, and this film is the start of that. I've also published a companion article on Substack, imathertonbaber.substack.com, and it's also linked in the notes to this film, for how to conceive of the space in which you will entertain. I frame it for the article somewhat in the context of decorating for parties, but the overall idea is that you want to consider your space as a whole, not just the table. And when you've done it properly, you may well find you don't need any table decoration at all. Maybe the beautiful lighting in the room and your table linen is all you need because you have decorated the space effectively in other places and ways. But let's say for a dining table, and you could probably adapt this very effectively for a buffet as well. But let's say you do want some kind of decoration on your table. Let's say your table has the space to accommodate decoration. The last thing you want is a crowded place where your guests cannot feel comfortable at the table. The old rule, by the way, is that in terms of frontage at the table, each person must have 22 inches per place setting. Now, that's the old standard, and more people occupy a bit more space now than they used to, so I don't know that I would strictly stick to 22 inches now, but that's the old standard, in case you find that helpful. To answer the question, how many people can I put around this table when I'm giving a party? So, look at the article where I walk you step by step through everything that I suggest you think about when you are conceiving of your party decoration. But for the kind of centerpiece I want to show you, I guess I really should tell you a story. It goes back to when I began learning about simplicity. And I was having dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel, and someone asked me if I knew a certain woman in society, and I said, no, I don't. And they said, oh, you must meet her. You will be soulmates instantly. And so probably by the next day, this woman had called me, the person I was eating with had made the introduction over the telephone, and this great woman called me and invited me to dinner in a day or two. And there I arrived at her house in the Venetian Islands, and the table I found in her dining room was one of the most magnificent I ever saw. But it was also the least cluttered that I ever saw. And that's when I first started to really seriously understand the quality of your linen, the quality of your crystal, the quality of your flatware and your china, the lighting in your room, whether or not you decide to light candles. It all goes together, and less is truly more. Less is more. Remember, subtraction. So, also, if you've been with me for more than one or two films, you know that I grow a lot of roses. I grow 35 varieties of heirloom roses, and this summer has been tough for the roses. We have had incredibly hot weather, week upon week, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with heat index temperatures often 112 or 14 degrees. On top of that, we have had consecutive weeks of 8 inches of rain one week and 10 inches the next and 9 inches the next. Just rain, rain, rain. So I grow my roses as naturally as I can. I do not use commercially made pesticides, herbicides, any of that. The only thing I apply is a fermented fish and seafood fertilizer that is made for organic growing. And with simply fertilizer and the know-how of care, which I have applied with utter consistency, I have prevented any disease from spreading in my garden, such that I have not had a tremendous harvest of roses as I usually have, but I also have not lost any plants. And that, this year, is a victory. That's what a bit of knowledge will get you. I also teach people how to grow roses. So if that's something you're looking to do to a high standard, let me know. I'd be delighted to help you too. So, what I have now are some great roses. I don't have a lot of them, but I have some great roses, as you saw in the beginning. And I want to have a simple, but rather grand, quietly grand centerpiece. And I want to use vases, which I use loosely, containers, that I already have around the house and might fulfill other purposes at other times. So, where have I built all of these collections, you ask? I am always going through brocantes and flea markets and stalls where people sell things, resale used goods and such. And I will highlight some points as I go to the kinds of money you can save picking up really beautiful, useful containers at huge savings. I always encourage you to do that. but you also have to think about the style and the function of your entertaining. So I'm going to talk you through these and think of questions you have. If I don't answer them, just put them in the comments below, because I really try to answer every single question and comment. First of all, this is a French mustard jar in just plain old glass. It is functional, it's charming, it has this nice high shoulder. If you were going to give your party and lay the table on a bare wood table and have a quite casual feel, this might be lovely. Next, you see I picked this up and the whole collection has the tag still on. I have not washed them yet. This is just a glass, a kind of ribbed juice glass by Libby, the American glass company. And this has a bigger mouth, which could support a slightly larger bloom, but it doesn't give you much height for a stem to anchor that bloom into the glass. So this has some challenges. It's also extremely casual. Moving into a bit more formal look, this is a tiny little tumbler, attributed to Waterford, but it is not marked, so I don't know that for certain. This is pretty, and it has a moderately large opening for the size of flowers you might grow at home, but again, very, very little height to create any sort of ballast with the stem inside. Your container is also your water source. I don't use any foam, and I suggest you don't either. Floral foam, none of that. I use very little wire and other mechanics. I just want to use a properly chosen container and fresh cut flowers and foliage. The more you can learn to work in that way, the better your floristry will be, period. This is by Waterford. Isn't this pretty? It has a nice, relatively wide opening, touch more height. The light certainly catches all of those facets beautifully. This could be lovely. For the size of the roses I have today, though, this is still a bit small. Now we move into some options that are colored. These are both Fenton art glass, and this is the color I think they call cranberry, and it is slightly iridescent. I don't know if you can see that on the film. They create that iridescence by using real gold in the manufacture. And it's a beautiful look. It is also a casual look. So whether you are concerned about the size in this small iteration, or maybe you don't like the casualness of this one, those are commitments you must consider, because when you have very limited ingredients, every ingredient matters tremendously. You cannot get away with anything. No transgression can be hidden. There's no place to hide. Now, this is a rocks glass by the kind of low-end crystal manufacturer Shannon, and these are commercially produced. I have a big collection of them because if I'm giving a big party, I can serve it entirely out of real glass. It looks nice. It feels good in the hand. It has good heft. If someone drops it, as someone recently did, out on my garden path, it is not so precious that I have to cry over it. Just sweep it up and keep people safe. And these make wonderful vases, though it has the same problem. There is not all that much height to anchor the size of bloom that would be appropriate for that opening. So, when there's no place to hide, every detail matters. Now, this is a lovely Irish crystal jam jar. Now, I will sing the praises of crystal jam jars slightly because they're a marvelous thing. First of all, they are generally quite thick crystal glass, so they catch the light beautifully. And they are a hero of multipurposing. You might use them for jam on your breakfast table. You might use them for jam on a buffet. You might use them for jam or mustard on a breakfast tray if you have a house guest. Then you can remove the lid and use it either with multiples of the same style or a variety that are similar but different, and use them as vases. You just use them in all kinds of ways, and because you find them relatively nicely made, relatively frequently out in the secondhand shops. It's a fun thing to shop for. Anytime someone says to me, well, I don't like antiques, they're perfectly beautiful, but I don't need any more furniture, I always suggest to them, find something small like the jam jar that you want to collect. And then every time you want to have a fun day out, you just go out looking for the kind of plate you collect or the kind of jam jar you collect, whatever it is, and you have a whole lifetime of fun. And you can, maybe they cost you $30 or $50 or $70, but sometimes you get lucky and find a great one for $12 or $15. That's the thrill of the hunt. Moving on, I've got big roses, big heavy roses. So this is French glass, not particularly fine, but certainly decorative. This particular swirl makes it relatively casual, but an opening of this size might need more than one bloom. And that is a bit more complicated than the ultimate simplicity that I suggest for you today. So we carry on. Now, this is delightful. This is a mid-20th century highball glass designed by the famous, very graphic designer, Robert Meth, M-E-T-H. And if you just type into the internet meth glass, you'll probably get hair-raising results. So put Robert Meth, and you will find a full range of things he did. Now, these are charming, as you see. This design has tins of caviar and shrimp cocktail, anchovies, olives, a radish, a lobster, slightly nautical kind of cocktail party theme. And this is extremely casual, but jaunty. So, a collection of these, usually an odd number for a tabletop, could be very nice, but I would not use fine roses with this. I would use something like carnations. Important at a dining table, when you are choosing your flowers, always think about scent. You do not want a highly scented bloom that will interfere with your experience of the food. And for that matter, no scented candles at this type of party where food is served, ever. Do not put them in the next room from where you're serving food. Do not put them anywhere. Maybe an argument could be made for the powder room, but that's it. We don't want scents interfering with the food. So, this heavy-footed example is really beautiful. This is by Galway Crystal. And if you want to see what this is like in practice, I give you Exhibit A and B. It has a relatively large opening, which is useful. It has just enough additional height from the earlier examples that you can anchor a really heavy bloom head, and that's helpful. However, speaking of anchoring, this looks an awful lot like a line of glasses made by the Moser Czech Glass Company. Czech is in Czech Republic. This is not marked, so I can't say that's what it is for sure. Nice wide opening, absolutely beautiful prismatic foot. This is moving in the right direction for our idea of chic, elegant simplicity. However, with water and a heavy bloom, this might become top-heavy and tip over. That's the last thing you want. The most beautiful design is absolutely useless if it is not functional within the parameters that you need to use it. So that brings us to my final choice for this project. This is a beautiful tall tumbler, just simply faceted with a bit of a thick foot, by Villeray and Bock, the German, mostly porcelain manufacturer, but they do make some of their own crystal products. This is the mixture of everything we're looking for today. It has a nice wide opening, a nice height to anchor the big flower head with a nice long stem. And the idea is going to be just a few of these tumblers in the center of the table with a few perfect blooms, and we're going to select those with utmost care. So stay tuned. I'll clear this away, bring out some great roses, and we'll start there. Welcome back, and I apologize for any errant noises that our equipment is picking up while we film today. We've had a lot of activity on the roads outside the house. They're building a building, and we've had a motorcyclist, and something seems to have been backing up for the whole time we've been filming, so I hope you've not heard the beeping, but if you have, I apologize. So, I've got some roses for us to consider, and I wanted to just be sure I've explained clearly before I tell you how to select what we're looking for. I want to be sure to define what we're looking for. And the easiest way I can do it is to ask you to imagine this work table as the dining table, and imagine that you have carefully chosen your linen. Imagine that you have carefully chosen your china, your glassware, and your flatware. And all of that is exquisite. There's no clutter, there's no debris, nothing extra. So the only thing we want to add are a few of these beautiful crystal glasses with roses. Now, if you're not sure what kind of flowers to choose, let me suggest this. As I mentioned before, I talk about it a lot. Floristry, good floristry, is always a botanic portrait of season and place. So I always suggest you grow at least some of your own flowers and foliage. It gives you marvelous quality. You can choose to grow the things that you love. You can choose a staggered blooming succession so that you've more or less got something of your own to cut when you generally know you like to entertain through the year. And there's just simply no beating the quality that you've grown to your own high standard. I don't grow everything I use. You probably don't grow everything you use, and that's okay too. So if you haven't grown it, let's say you're going into a flower market. What do you choose? Well, still keep in mind what is growing and blooming in your area at the time. I always feel that particularly with residential floristry, I am not saying amateur floristry at home. I'm saying a high standard of professional floristry that is made to be enjoyed in a residential setting. You should at least view that floristry with the general feel and impression that even if it wasn't cut from the grounds of that residence, it could have been. That's a wonderful guide that will never lead you astray. The same goes for how to think about produce for selecting your menu. If it's local and in season, that's a good place to start for thinking about what to choose. So, we have garden roses. Garden roses are essential to the success of this design. Now, if you were in spring, you might have peonies. If you were in late summer into fall, you might have dahlias. But the thing that you get with these fabulous roses, let me find one for you that's a really prime example. These are just exquisite. But since we have very, very few, I want the best of the best of the best for what we're doing. This one's a good example. I have allowed these to mature quite far because I want them open and voluminous all the way around. This is not a grocery store rose. This is not a standard florist kind of shop rose. This is superb. And I've even decided to show it with these crepey outer petals beginning to turn under, because that is the cycle of life. That's the story of the flower, the story of the garden. It's even slightly Dutch still life. We're enjoying it all the way through its life cycle. And this particular rose has a lovely sort of confectionery sugar frosting scent. So, again, careful of scent at the dining table. This scent is extremely light, yet when people enter the room, they will know that fresh flowers are present. And the scent is rather culinary. So, It's not like putting a gardenia on the dining table, or a, I don't know, hyacinth, for example. Tuberose, boy, that would turn someone's stomach when they're eating something savory. But this is wonderful. I hope that the camera can pick up just how beautiful it is. And I'm not going to cut it for the glass yet, but I just want you to see the relationship. The famous florist and restaurateur Charles Masson famously said, and I'm slightly paraphrasing, anyone can make a beautiful necklace from a pile of diamonds, but it is the artist who understands the use of color and scale and proportion and all the elements of art and design to take relatively humble ingredients, very often that the artist, him or herself, cannot truly afford, and from them, by following those rules of art, make not only an object of beauty, but an object of genuine value. And that's really what we're getting at when we think about that story I told you about Picasso. Yes, we could make arguments about what's happened to prices in the art market today. That's not the illustrative point. The illustrative point is an idea that Carl Fabergé often talked about. And I'm paraphrasing him again, but he often said something to the effect of, I am not interested in objects whose only value is in the materials from which they were made. He was interested in those materials in terms of what was done to them, in terms of scale, proportion, color, etc. So floristry is no different. I think most people can see these roses are magnificent. They are not a standard rose. They are not boring. They are lively. They're visually compelling. And we are showing them at the precise moment of their maturity where we want to show them. Maybe in the context of your setting and your containers, you want to show them at a different stage. But let me show you something. This is another lovely rose. This is going to be, in about 2 days, marvelous. But it is not that open yet, and I have not taken it upon myself to put them through the kinds of processes that would expedite their opening. So this is what I've got. I'm actually going to use them in an arrangement later, and I want them to open over the next few days. So this is an exquisite rose. I love that peachy color. But this here, look at that. That's pitiful. That's not exquisite. That's not opulent. So be opulent with the sensuality of your materials. And if you're not sure what to look for in beautifully opened roses, find that old volume of watercolors that are reproduced in beautiful prints of Redoute. And he did all sorts of botanic illustrations. And there's a whole volume of just the roses. Look at that. That's basically what we're creating here. One of Redoute's roses, and this kind of a vase, we'll call it a vase for this purpose, and the rose just almost floats in it. So let's look at them. I'm going to choose from these beautiful candy pink roses and these sumptuous, deep, sort of grass-fed butter yellow. And some of these, on the very edge of the outer petals, have the barest whisper of the same pink. So I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but I'm just going to work through them one at a time, and we'll see where we get together. And if I feel it's getting boring as I go, I might speed this up just a bit because, as one of my old oil painting instructors often said, a good painting is 90% thought and planning and careful decision making, 5% execution, and 5% editing your own work. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look very analytically as I make every choice. See you along the way. Now, you'll notice all of my glasses are filled to exactly the same level of water. It's that attention to detail that subconsciously tells your guests or the recipients of your design, your client if you're a professional, that you care and you have taken the time to get everything right. That's what they're paying top dollar for. Anyone can sell them garden roses. The details matter tremendously. Now, I'm deciding to remove this petal because it is showing just a touch of age. And I'm deciding to leave this petal because even though it's showing age, it has just a kiss of that candy pink. And whoever is sitting opposite the backside of this rose will see that, and it will give them a magical little moment that they will remember for a very long time. I do not normally reflex petals, and a primary warning I want to give you is to not use inferior roses and reflex the petals and think that is the same as a garden rose. It is not. It always looks like a cheap impersonation, and it invalidates the other good things that you may have done in your design. Don't do it. In the case of this type of rose, where they have some maturity and their shape is appreciated by pulling just a couple of the petals back, I'm thinking about it. I haven't even decided this is what I'll keep. It's just a possibility. I think I'm deciding against it. This one petal that is slightly curled on its own, I think I'll leave it. And I love this relation of this little tiny sepal coming down to meet the glass. I might make revisions as we go, but this is a good starting point. Never ever foliage below the waterline, but when I can have a little bit of foliage and keep it just above the water, that lets people know they're dealing with a real flower from a real garden. I want that even a tad shorter. I just thought of a wonderful additional point to make about that, and in thinking about my dimension there, I forgot what it was. Well, maybe it will come to me in a moment. I'm wondering if I might find one of these beautiful yellow roses with a leaf high enough up the stem to keep on. Ah, possibly. This one's not quite as open though, and when we have so few ingredients, this is not the time to make sacrifices. This is the time to hold out for everything you're hoping for. I'm going to choose this one. I don't think the leaves can remain, probably, but the bloom itself is magnificent. Look at that. And you can see on the back just a little blushing of that beautiful pink. It's also important to note that not only have I selected marvelous roses, but they are conditioned to perfection. That means they are cut at the right moment and they are prepared so that they can take up the maximum amount of water and perform beautifully in the vase. If you want to know how to do that to really high standard, go to my website, imathertonbaber.com, and from the menu select Learn Online, and I have a whole class on cutting and conditioning. If you have any questions, it will be answered there. Now, my feeling about this, just looking at it in this context, is that the third bloom should be pink. And this one looks spectacular. How about that? I would love to have one with just a touch more foliage higher up the stem, but that's by and large not what I got to choose from today. Possibly here. I might be able to make this work convincingly, and I want to show you that here on these outer petals, they are turning dark pink. They are reaching the very end of their life, and I am consciously choosing to leave those on to tell the story of these roses, because over the course of dinner, I want people to look at them and notice all the detail that I have chosen for them, put into them, so on. Now, unfortunately, I love that height, but the foliage is just a little low, so I'm taking it off. Now, I'm going to put these out and have a look. I will say, you might, I keep saying dinner, but you might do this sort of thing for lunch. I certainly would not do it for breakfast. This is a bit much. If you wanted to have one magnificent bloom, you know, maybe near the salt and pepper or at some kind of anchor location on the table, I would not have this big long breakfast table and one rose in the middle. But if you're at a small breakfast table, one rose or a couple of blooms in one vase might be appropriate. I would not do a collection like this for breakfast. If you wanted to do it for lunch, keep in mind you will probably be seeing it more often than not in sunlight or sunlight with artificial light, you know, electric light in the house. And if you are doing it in the evening, you will have mostly artificial light and maybe some candlelight. So once I show you how I would display these as the centerpiece, we'll talk about candles. First, let me have a look. This one is extremely pretty. This one is slightly long. And I'm not saying that just to make the point, though I do want you to notice I may have cut it just slightly too short now. See what happens when I went too short? There's no way. There we go. And I want to put it for sure so that that pink petal can be observed. This one with its little bit of leaf is really very pretty. I would love to have it a shave shorter, but then the leaf will go into the water. What have we here? I do think I can get by with shortening this one just slightly. There we go. That is, I don't know if you can tell the difference on film, but that really makes a tremendous difference. And this one is so pretty, to make sure my trimmings are not stuck to the side there. So I will be right back. I want to clear these away so you can have an accurate representation of what we might have at a dinner table, and we will talk about how to place them. I'll be right back. Welcome to the party. Here we are. We have no menu and no china, flatware, glassware, but we have a centerpiece. Before I tell you exactly how I've chosen to place them, let me tell you something I don't want to forget. If you are a professional and you are doing this type of design for a client, some clients will be more or less amenable to you using their glassware. You using their glassware can be wonderful because the client does not have to return anything to you after the party. It also has the risk of damaging your client's glassware, which you do not want to do. You know, if you were to replace this Villeray and Bach tumbler by Villeray and Bach, it would probably be, I don't know, $60 or $80. If you were to replace something comparable by Baccarat or Moser, it would be $250 or $300. And as close as margins are for most floristry work today, we feel those kinds of hits keenly. So take extremely good care of your client's containers, you must leave them or return them to your client in the exact same pristine condition in which you've received them. In fact, if a container is broken from a client, I generally will not accept it, just in case clients have a bit of a sticky memory. Oh, no, it was in perfect shape when I left it with you. Well, if you don't accept it, you save that problem from the start. So, how have I placed these? I have actually placed them in 3 rows. 2, 2, and 1. Spaced evenly apart. The spacing matters. Again, with simplicity, everything matters. Nothing more complex than simplicity, as the quote we started with said. And it's true. We've used an odd number of containers. The old adage is nature abhors a pair, meaning nature tends more often to occur in odd numbers. Looking at nature, I'm not sure we could say that's always true, but it's a good guideline. Our brain intuitively understands odd numbers as feeling balanced and complete. So, could you have done 3 yellow roses and 2 pink? Yes. I have been guided entirely by my materials. And even if the stems of my roses were a little thinner and more flexible, that would have changed how I related them to the containers. Also, I would generally face the flowers toward the guests. I have turned this one around to you so you could see it from the front side. But you see the flower before you from the front and the flowers further away from the back, and it's all beautiful. What else? You could space them differently, but I want to show you how that would change things. I'm spacing these, assuming this is about the size of our dining table, assuming we are not serving family style or a la bourgeois, where we would have platters placed on the table or passed around the table and then placed in the middle. If you need the center of the table for the function of the meal, do not crowd it with flowers. You can have flowers on your sideboard, you can have flowers in your entrance hall. Again, check my article on Substack. I go into all of that. But let's move these closer together. And you see, again, this is still facing you, just for the benefit of the film. This suddenly feels silly. A little circle of flowers, that is not interesting, that is not compelling. And you lose the impact of each bloom separately when you see them all as a mass and your eye just says, oh, a circle, I understand that. Your brain isn't working to figure it out. So I would not do this. I also would not place them. I'm turning this one intentionally slightly from you so you can appreciate that bit of pink. I'm also not putting them so far apart that it looks like you could run your bowling balls through there. This is not elegant. No, the elegance, the style, the art comes in getting all the little details right. And boy, it is an internal quest. The people that care about this level of nuance are mostly doing it for themselves. And I say that of myself most of all. People say, oh my goodness, you've had so many dazzling clients and, you know, all of these many, many people. And, you know, that's fine. But I always feel truly I've had one client my whole life, and it's been myself. Every job I've ever done has been because I wanted to learn what I was doing. I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to be more efficient at it or more artful at it. And all these years later, a few things have been learned, at least. And you notice that in this original configuration, something like this, I have placed this one vase in the center of the rest of the composition. But because everything is not even, matchy-matchy, it does not feel exactly like a church altar. That's why we use odd numbers. We should talk about candles. If it's in the evening, after 6 p.m. at the local time, wherever you are, candles might be wanted. I'm of 2 minds on candles for parties. Candlelight is beautiful. and it creates a magical effect. But when you start thinking about entertaining with the ultimate simplicity of this type of bare, exposed elegance, candles become a bit of a challenge. Ordinarily, you would use a small votive candle in a votive holder. They might be plain glass, they might be a bit fancy like cut crystal, but they are a design and aesthetic choice, no matter what they are. And it is simply more that you are laying on your table. So if you have something very simple, thinking it's visually unobtrusive, that can suddenly make an otherwise extremely formal design feel much more casual. And on the other hand, if you have really quite fancy, for example, I have some absolutely exquisite votive holders. They're all a little different, but close enough that you use them together as a collection, by Heritage Irish Crystal. They are superb. But they are visually a strong commitment of something to look at. When I use them on a dining table, they are generally the decoration. So when you've got something like these incredible roses, I'm going to favor them all towards you just so you can have a last look. Let the roses sing. As designers, as makers, as creative people, we so often spend years and decades of our lives trying to make things beautiful. And I think taking a note from the tradition of Japanese design, for example, look all around. There is beauty around us. Let it sing. That kind of highlights a challenge I've had with this film. And I don't want to just go on and on for nothing, because when you are teaching about simplicity, there is a simplicity in the instruction as well. If I'm teaching an advanced technique, I can go on and on about all the minutiae of how you prepare the stems and how you put them together and all the considerations. But when you think about simplicity, as that quote I shared with you said, nothing is more complex than simplicity, and perfection, what I hope we're all aiming for, perfection is the ultimate outcome of subtraction. So when subtraction is ultimately our aim, there's only so much I can say. But I encourage you to put together some glasses from your pantry, or go out into a brocante or a tag sale and see what you can find. Find yourself some beautiful blooms. Put them in proportion to your containers. Think about the context in which you display them, and try it for yourself. Let me know how you do in the comments. I look greatly forward to hopefully seeing some of your efforts on Instagram. And with that, I wish you well. I'll see you soon. I'm going to use all of these roses in a fabulous demo that I'm also going to film. So watch for that coming up too. See you soon.